Welcome to Lifelong Echoes, where we explore the remarkable stories of people who changed our world forever. Today, we enter the magical world of Walt Disney, a man who was once told he lacked imagination, but went on to create Mickey Mouse, build the most famous theme parks on Earth, and prove that dreams really can come true if you have the courage to pursue them. This is the story of how a poor farm boy became the king of entertainment and taught the world to believe in magic. On December 5th, 1901, in a small apartment above a bakery in Chicago, Illinois, a baby was born who would one day fill the world with wonder and magic. His name was Walter Elias Disney, but everyone would come to know him simply as Walt. From his earliest days, Walt showed an extraordinary love for drawing and storytelling that would shape the rest of his life. Walt's father, Elias Disney, was a strict, hard-working man who believed that success came only through serious labor and discipline. Elias saw Walt's constant drawing as a waste of time and often discouraged his son's artistic interests. But Walt's mother, Flora, quietly encouraged her son's creativity, giving him paper and pencils whenever she could. When Walt was 4 years old, the Disney family moved to a farm in Marceline, Missouri, a small rural town that would forever remain Walt's vision of the perfect American community. On the farm, Walt was surrounded by animals, pigs, chickens, horses, and mice that lived in the barn. He spent hours watching these animals and began to imagine what they might be thinking and feeling. Walt's love for drawing was so strong that he would draw on any surface he could find. Once, he used tar to paint pictures of animals on the side of the family's white farmhouse. His father was furious, but Walt's aunt secretly encouraged him, even giving him a notebook specifically for his drawings. At school, Walt was more interested in drawing cartoons in the margins of his books than paying attention to his lessons. His teachers often scolded him for not focusing on serious subjects like mathematics and reading. But Walt's imagination was already working on a different level. He was creating stories and characters in his mind. When Walt was 9 years old, the family was forced to sell the farm due to financial difficulties. They moved to Kansas City, where Walt's father bought a newspaper route. Walt and his older brother Roy had to get up at 3:30 every morning to deliver newspapers before school, regardless of weather conditions. The newspaper work was exhausting for a young boy, but it taught Walt the value of hard work and persistence. More importantly, it allowed him to see every corner of Kansas City and observe all types of people, experiences that would later inspire many of his animated characters. When Walt turned 16, he was eager to join the army and fight in World War I, just like his older brothers. But he was too young to enlist, so he joined the Red Cross as an ambulance driver. Walt spent a year in France, where he saw the devastation of war but also discovered his talent for entertaining others with his drawings and stories. After returning from France in 1919, Walt decided to pursue his dream of becoming an artist. He moved back to Kansas City and found a job at an advertising company, creating simple advertisements for newspapers. The pay was low, only $50 per month, but Walt was thrilled to be earning money for drawing. At the advertising company, Walt met up Iworks, a talented artist who shared his passion for drawing and animation. Together, they became fascinated by the new art of animation, making drawings appear to move by photographing them in slightly different positions and showing the photographs in rapid sequence. In 1922, Walt started his first business, Laugh-O-Gram Films, creating short animated cartoons. He hired several employees and produced fairy tale cartoons like Little Red Riding Hood and Cinderella. Walt was convinced that animation was the future of entertainment, and his early cartoons showed remarkable creativity and technical innovation. But Walt was a better artist than businessman. He spent all his money on equipment and employee salaries, leaving nothing for his own living expenses. He often slept in his office and survived on cold beans eaten straight from the can. Within a year, Laugh-O-Gram Films was bankrupt. At age 21, Walt Disney was broke, discouraged, and facing the possibility that his dreams were impossible. Many people would have given up, but Walt had an unshakable belief in his vision. With $40 in his pocket and a cardboard suitcase containing his drawing supplies, he bought a train ticket to Hollywood, California, where his brother Roy was recovering from tuberculosis. "I'm going out there to direct pictures," Walt told his friends confidently, though he had no job prospects and knew almost nobody in Hollywood. In Hollywood, Walt initially tried to find work as a director, but no studio would hire him. Finally, he realized he needed to return to animation, the field where he had shown the most talent. Walt convinced Roy to become his business partner, and together they founded the Disney Brothers studio in their uncle's garage. Walt's first breakthrough came when he created a series called Alice Comedies, which combined live-action footage of a young girl with animated backgrounds and characters. The series was successful enough to keep the studio afloat, but Walt dreamed of creating something entirely new and original. In 1927, Walt developed a character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, who became quite popular. But when Walt went to New York to negotiate a new contract, he received devastating news. His distributor had secretly hired away most of Walt's animators and claimed ownership of the Oswald character. Walt had lost both his creation and his employees in one terrible meeting. The train ride back to California was one of the darkest moments in Walt's life. He had worked for years to build his studio, only to have it destroyed by a dishonest business partner. But during that long train journey, Walt's creative mind began working on a new character, a mouse. Walt had always remembered the friendly mice that lived in his old studio in Kansas City. One mouse in particular had been so tame that it would sit on Walt's drawing board while he worked. Now, inspired by that memory, Walt began sketching a cartoon mouse character. Initially, Walt wanted to call his mouse Mortimer, but his wife Lillian thought the name sounded too pompous. "Why not call him Mickey?" she suggested. And so Mickey Mouse was born during a train ride across America, created by a young man who refused to let failure destroy his dreams. Walt's first Mickey Mouse cartoons were silent films, but Walt realized that adding sound could revolutionize animation. In 1928, he created Steamboat Willie, the first cartoon with synchronized sound. Walt himself provided Mickey's high-pitched voice, a job he would continue for nearly 20 years. Steamboat Willie premiered at the Colony Theater in New York on November 18, 1928, and was an immediate sensation. Audiences had never seen anything like a cartoon character whose actions perfectly matched the music and sound effects. Mickey Mouse became an overnight star, and Walt Disney became one of the most famous names in entertainment. The success of Mickey Mouse allowed Walt to expand his studio and hire the best animators in Hollywood. But Walt was never satisfied with just copying his previous successes. He constantly pushed his team to innovate and create something better. In 1932, Walt revolutionized animation again by creating the first full-color cartoon, Flowers and Trees. The cartoon won the first Academy Award ever given to an animated film. Walt continued experimenting with new techniques, creating the first cartoon with realistic human characters and developing new cameras that could create depth and movement never before seen in animation. Walt also expanded the Disney universe by creating new characters: Minnie Mouse, Donald Duck, Goofy, and Pluto. Each character had a distinct personality, and Walt insisted that his animators study real animals and people to make their drawings more believable and engaging. But Walt's most ambitious dream was still ahead of him. While other studios were content making short cartoons, Walt wanted to create the first full-length animated movie. Everyone in Hollywood told him it was impossible. Audiences would never sit through an hour-long cartoon. Critics mockingly called Walt's project Disney's folly. Walt ignored the critics and spent 4 years creating Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, hiring hundreds of artists and spending the enormous sum of $1.5 million. He mortgaged his house, borrowed money from banks, and risked everything on his belief that people would love a feature-length animated film. On December 21, 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered at the Carthay Circle Theater in Hollywood. Walt was so nervous that he couldn't sit still during the screening. But when the movie ended, the audience gave it a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Many people were crying, moved by the beauty and emotion of Walt's animated masterpiece. Snow White became the highest-grossing film of 1938 and proved that animation could tell serious, emotional stories just as powerfully as live-action movies. Walt received a special Academy Award for the film, one large Oscar statue accompanied by 7 smaller ones, representing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The success of Snow White launched what historians now call the golden age of Disney animation. Walt and his team created a series of masterpieces: Pinocchio, 1940, Fantasia, 1940, Dumbo, 1941, and Bambi, 1942. Each film pushed the boundaries of what was possible in animation, featuring more realistic character movement, innovative camera techniques, and emotional depth that had never been achieved in animated films. Fantasia was perhaps Walt's most ambitious project, combining classical music with abstract and narrative animation. Walt called it a concert feature and hoped it would elevate animation to the level of high art. While Fantasia was initially less successful than Walt's other films, it is now recognized as one of the greatest achievements in animation history. During this period, Walt also expanded into other areas of entertainment. He created educational films, nature documentaries, and live-action movies. The Disney Studio became a complete entertainment company, not just an animation house. But Walt's success was interrupted by World War II. Many of his animators were drafted into military service, and the government commissioned Disney to create training films and propaganda cartoons. While this work kept the studio operating during the war, it prevented Walt from creating the elaborate animated features that had made him famous. After World War II, Walt faced new challenges. Television was becoming popular, and movie attendance was declining. Many people in Hollywood saw television as the enemy of the film industry, but Walt saw it as an opportunity. In 1954, Walt launched Disneyland, a weekly television show that became one of the most popular programs on TV. The show featured behind-the-scenes looks at Disney movie production, nature documentaries, and stories about American history and culture. Walt himself hosted many episodes, becoming one of television's first major personalities. But Walt's television show served a secret purpose. It was actually a way to finance his most ambitious dream yet. Since the 1930s, Walt had been planning to build an amusement park unlike anything that had ever existed. Most amusement parks of that era were cheap, dirty places with mechanical rides and carnival games. Walt envisioned something completely different, a clean, beautiful, family-friendly park where parents and children could have magical experiences together. Walt called his park Disneyland, and he planned every detail personally. He wanted visitors to feel like they were entering different worlds, a fairy tale castle, a frontier town, a jungle adventure, and a glimpse into the future. Walt studied existing amusement parks, traveled to Europe to see famous gardens and palaces, and consulted with experts in psychology, architecture, and engineering. Building Disneyland required enormous amounts of money, far more than Walt's movie profits could provide. Banks refused to lend him money, saying that amusement parks were bad investments. But Walt's television show provided the solution. He made a deal with ABC Network to help finance Disneyland in exchange for producing the TV show. On July 17, 1955, Disneyland opened in Anaheim, California. Despite numerous technical problems on opening day, rides broke down, restaurants ran out of food, and the asphalt was so fresh that women's high heels sank into it. Disneyland was immediately recognized as something revolutionary. Walt didn't just build Disneyland and walk away. He was involved in every aspect of the park's operation. He would often spend entire days walking through Disneyland, observing guests, talking to employees, and constantly thinking of ways to improve the experience. Walt insisted that Disneyland employees, called cast members, treat every visitor like a welcome guest in their home. He personally trained many employees and established standards of cleanliness, courtesy, and attention to detail that became legendary in the entertainment industry. Walt also continued to innovate within the park. He created audio animatronics, lifelike robotic figures that could move and speak, making attractions more realistic and engaging than simple mechanical rides. The technology developed for Disneyland attractions later influenced industries from theater to space exploration. Disneyland's success exceeded Walt's wildest dreams. Within a year, it was attracting millions of visitors from around the world. Families would save for years to take trips to the happiest place on earth, and Disneyland became one of America's most famous landmarks. But Walt was already dreaming of something even bigger. He wanted to build a new kind of city in Florida, a place where families could live in a clean, safe, technologically advanced community. He called this Project Epcot, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. Walt envisioned Epcot as a working city of 20,000 residents, featuring the latest advances in technology, transportation, and urban planning. He wanted to prove that American ingenuity could solve the problems of modern cities: pollution, traffic, crime, and urban decay. Unfortunately, Walt would not live to see Epcot built. He had been a heavy smoker since his teenage years, and in 1966, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Walt Disney died on December 15, 1966, at age 65. His death shocked millions of people around the world who had grown up with his movies and visited his theme park. Flags at Disneyland flew at half-mast, and tributes poured in from world leaders, fellow entertainers, and ordinary families whose lives had been touched by Walt's creations. At Walt's funeral, one of his longtime animators said, "The world will be a little less bright without Walt Disney. He showed us that dreams can come true if you have the courage to pursue them." But Walt's death was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of his eternal legacy. Roy Disney, Walt's brother and business partner, dedicated the rest of his life to completing Walt's vision. In 1971, Walt Disney World opened in Florida, featuring not only a new Magic Kingdom theme park, but also Epcot Center, which opened in 1982. Today, Disney is one of the largest entertainment companies in the world, with theme parks on 4 continents, cruise ships, television networks, and movie studios. But the company's success is still built on the foundation Walt established: the belief that entertainment should inspire people, bring families together, and remind everyone that magic is possible. Walt's animated films continue to delight new generations of children. Classic characters like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Snow White remain as popular today as they were decades ago. New Disney movies continue to win Academy Awards and break box office records, proving that Walt's storytelling vision is timeless. Walt Disney's life proves that the biggest obstacle to achieving your dreams is often believing they're impossible. Everyone told Walt that audiences wouldn't watch full-length animated movies, that television was bad for the movie business, and that his theme park ideas were too expensive and complicated to work. But Walt had something more powerful than the approval of critics. He had imagination, persistence, and an unshakable belief in his vision. When people said his ideas were impossible, Walt simply worked harder to prove them wrong. Walt also understood something important about success. It's not just about making money or becoming famous. Walt's greatest satisfaction came from seeing children laugh at his cartoons and watching families create happy memories at Disneyland. He measured his success by the joy he brought to others. Perhaps most importantly, Walt Disney never stopped believing in magic. Even as a successful businessman managing thousands of employees, he remained the same farm boy who loved to draw pictures of animals and imagine what they might be thinking. Walt once said, "All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them." His life is living proof of that philosophy. From a poor farm boy who was told he lacked imagination to the creator of the most magical entertainment empire in the world, Walt Disney showed us that dreams really can come true. Thank you for joining us on this magical journey through Walt Disney's remarkable life. Remember, the dreams that seem impossible today might just be the realities of tomorrow. All it takes is imagination, hard work, and the courage to believe in magic. Don't forget to subscribe to Lifelong Echoes for more inspiring stories that help you learn English while discovering the extraordinary lives of extraordinary people.